Love it. Let's move on to USA versus Portugal. Man, is there
Oh,
drama around the US women. And I've said on this podcast, I'm a big fan of the US women's national team. I like their swagger. If you want
mhm.
to say they're overly confident, I love that about them. I love that they kind of embrace the villain role in women's football. They are an extremely decorated program and very, very successful.
Mhm.
I'm a big, big fan. But the reality is what we've been seeing from them at this World Cup is not the same from what we've seen from this US team in previous World Cups, in previous Olympic Games. So, a lot of fans, US women's fans in particular, are not happy because if you watch that game against Portugal, you could argue, which is how I feel, Portugal deserved to win that match. Now, when you look at the
Mhm.
stats alone, USA 17 shots, 6 on target. Portugal, 6 shots, 0 on target. If you just look at that stat, you'd be like, no, US was the better team. But if you watch the game, Portugal, 57% of the possession, USA, 43% of the possession. Portugal was nifty. They were crafty.
Mhm.
Their football IQ was so high. They were just absolutely rattling the US in every way that they could. And at some point, I'm like, Portugal's going to go through. And
Mhm.
they kind of deserve to based on the way this game's going. A lot of fans are saying that the US should be going home. Portugal hit that post in extra time. Lots of drama. What do you think, Julia, is at this point is the US women's national team in trouble?
Wow, that is a big question, but I'll get to that in a sec. But could you imagine if Portugal actually got that goal at the end and the
I was
US team was going to go home?
their World Cup debut. It was their World Cup debut. And the way Portugal played, I had Portugal getting out of this group because I
Yep.
love the way they play. I think they're such a fun, smart team. It's the
Mhm.
best way to put it. I think what they lack is a clinical striker.
Mhm.
And I'm hopeful that the next time the World Cup comes around, the next time the Olympics come around, they kind of have that aspect of their game figured out. But I mean, as a team that's making their World Cup debut to kind of keep the US on their toes the way that they did and
Amazing.
outplay them, I was so like shocked, not shocked because again, I rated Portugal high, but shocked that they were able to do that against a US women's team that's projected to win the entire tournament.
Mhm. They held their own. It was so cool to watch. And wow, that just would have been a moment if they actually did go through. But yes, is the US women's national team in trouble? I don't want to say yes or no either way, but I'm leaning more towards the yes side because I don't know. Sorry, guys, for the hot takes here, but feel free to tweet me. I don't really care.
We
But
love hot takes, Julia. Don't worry
exactly,
about it.
I just haven't seen anything super special from them. If I'm being honest, in the last couple games, I know they had their win, the first one, but I haven't seen that usual spark that the United States team has. I haven't seen really anyone kind of step up and force their team to have momentum to play like a coherent unit. It feels, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it feels sort of like there's 11 players out there, but not one team, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that's not really what I'm used to or anybody else is used to seeing from the United States. We're not seeing them be as clinical as what they used to be. And coming up in the round of 16 now, like, I don't know if they know how lucky they were, honestly, to get through here. And they're playing Sweden.
Yeah.
Sweden. That is going to be a very, very tough game for the United States if they can't pull it together. But this is do or die. This is a do or die moment. Sudden death. Will the United States be able to turn it around? This is their moment to do that.
So here's how I feel. Was this the US women's national team worst group stage performance ever in the history of their World Cup? Yes. 3 games, 5 points. Uh, but sometimes, like we were just saying, it doesn't matter how you get the result as long as you get the result. I have to see how the US do against Sweden. If they absolutely tank the performance against Sweden and they're out of the World Cup and this is what their whole World Cup performance has been summed up to, yeah, like very, very poor, very poor. And then I'll give
Mm-hmm.
my opinion on that. But let's say they have the game of their lives and this US women's national team finally starts connecting and their big time players finally show up and they beat Sweden. maybe they start peaking at the right
Yep.
time. They did what they have to do in the group stage. It wasn't pretty, but they advanced, and now they play Sweden. They move on and they peak at the right time. This game for me against Sweden is everything. This also, shockingly enough, is the most played fixture in the history of the Women's World Cup, set to be played out for a 7th time between Sweden and the US.
No way.
There's a lot of history now between the Americans and the Swedish. So you know that there's going to be a different type of like momentum to this game. They're playing for a lot. They're playing for, just not only for a World Cup win and not only for their countries, but it's kind of that clout that you have, this rivalry that I'm sure that they have between two teams. So I have to wait and see. But if the US tank and they make a round of 16 exit, you have to wonder, did you hear Carly Lloyd's comments after the game? You have to wonder if Carly Lloyd is absolutely right. It was spicy.
But it was right. You're right. Mm-hmm.
Well, so for everyone listening and watching who didn't hear, Carly Lloyd after the game was I think she was on Fox News or Fox Sports, and she saw a video of like Alex Morgan and Crystal Dunn and some of the players dancing after the Portugal game and celebrating that they've moved on to the round of 16. And Carly Lloyd was like horrified. She's like, I've never seen this happen before in my life. And she saw a picture or a video of some of the players going to the fans in the stands, taking photos with them and celebrating. And she said, there's always a way to go and say hi to your family and respect the fans. But when the player of the match was the post, alluding to the post that Portugal had hit in extra time, she said, you should be very happy that you're not going home. Mm-hmm. So Carly Lloyd kind of ripping into this U.S. women's national team saying, why are you celebrating? Why are you dancing? There's really nothing to celebrate. Do it silently almost, because you're lucky you're not on a bus and then straight to the airport heading back to the States. Mm-hmm. And I kind of love that from Carly, because I think it takes a lot of courage to say that as a former player and with someone who obviously is going to, you see the name Carly Lloyd and the headline Carly Lloyd, it's going to gain traction. Yeah. So Carly Lloyd having that courage says a lot about how she feels, maybe some other former U.S. women's national team players. So we'll see if that's a little bit of a wake-up call for the younger players who are playing at this World Cup. But, a lot of people are speaking how they feel. The Netherlands coach, people didn't like what he had to say, but is he wrong? Mm-hmm. Saying that this team at this Women's World Cup is not like the teams from the past. Sometimes people just have the courage to speak up about what's going on around this U.S. women's national team program. And right now, they're not wrong. Right now, in this moment, they're not wrong. Can the U.S. start playing differently and prove us wrong? Absolutely. That's why I'm holding off on my opinion. But just crazy to see what's happening.
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. I honestly, that quote from Carly, though, I read that. I was like, first of all, first reaction from a journalist perspective, I was like, the media are going to eat that up.
Of course.
But second of all, I thought, ain't that the truth, girl? Like, I'm so glad she went out and said that. And I really hope this United States team sees that, because it's true. It's true. It could be a little moment for them. I don't know. But again, no judgments. I'm happy. They were happy after the game. No, whatever. But at the same time, this is not what anyone was really thinking from this team going in. And I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I would just, like I said earlier, I would just love to see some of these team players, like younger ones especially, come in and have their moment to shine. Because, like, do they really realize they were inches away from losing? I don't know.
Well, it's crazy because at the beginning, when we were talking about, I believe it was USA's game versus Vietnam, Sophia Smith scored 2 goals. And we're like, wow, here she is on the biggest stage in her World Cup debut, 2 goals. I think the youngest player to do that in the US program history. So we're raving about it, but then it's just kind of been silent,
Really silent.
And even her game against Portugal, it doesn't all come down to Sophia Smith, but she was just kind of taken out of the game. And you expect more from these powerhouses that we've been reading about, that we watch outside of the Women's World Cup, to now come in and do work. And unfortunately, that's the expectation we have of superstars. That's the expectation I have of Alex Morgan. So when Alex Morgan, in my opinion, isn't playing 10 out of 10, like I'm used to seeing her play at the World Cup, I'm like, well, what the hell's going on? That unfortunately, that type of expectation comes when you are one of the best in the game. Does Alex Morgan have to have the best game every single day of her life? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes I feel like the effort is lacking.
Yeah.
And that's what's concerning for me about this US women's national team. There's no effort, there's no drive, there's no hunger. They're not playing for each other. It's a very different feel than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's sort of like this. I don't know if this is fair to say, but it's sort of like they're not really looking like they want to win another World Cup. Like they don't. And I was gonna bring up Alex Morgan as well. So thank you for doing that, Caroline. But in the sense of she was tapped to win the Golden Boot of this whole tournament. She had the best betting odds, not just in Canada, but like across the globe for anyone who participates in sports betting. I don't, so I have no idea about that world. But here we are. I don't know. Like, it's not, I don't think it's going to be Alex Morgan unless they have matches of their lives moving forward. Very different narrative. Very different narrative.
I know, it's crazy, and it's interesting that you mentioned some of the stuff that you do, because a lot of people are questioning the focus of this women's national team, US women's national team. They came into that game against Portugal, and before the game, you see kind of their pregame fits, right? Like their what they wear to the game, and they're taking these stylish photos on the field, and everyone's like, what the hell is going on? This is the World Cup, and they have to basically, not lose this game to go through, and they're taking pictures. Now, I don't read too much into this stuff. I'm like, some players need to do what they need to do, maybe not think too much about the game. That's kind of what might be more optimal for their performance if they're not too focused on the game. But on the other side, I'm like, I don't know if you should be taking, cool, stylish pictures like that right before a game. You know what I mean? I'm
it
not
doesn't
there.
look like they're taking it seriously.
Honestly, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Again, maybe we're wrong. Maybe they prove us wrong. Maybe at the end of this entire World Cup, they win the whole thing, and we're like, well, that was a trip. That was a crazy trip that the U.S. women's national team took us on. But yeah, I don't know. I can't say that would be me in like, oh, here's my stylish, photo right before a game. Maybe it works for them, but I think, yeah, we just have to see how the rest plays out, because I'm very curious how Sweden goes.
I don't know. I mean, right now, it's hard to say, but if the United States is playing like they are right now, I think it's going to Sweden.